Hello students, it's your history teacher with the last online lecture from this unit. By this topic, we will put the happy ending to the Slovak national uprising. Because even though uprising was suppressed in Banská Bystrica and there was this cruel reaction when 60 villages were burned, there were already Czechoslovak forces together with Red Army in the eastern Slovakia, and they were on their way to liberate our territory. So today's topic is liberation of Czechoslovakia. So when the Red Army and Czechoslovak forces that were led by General Ludvík Svoboda crossed the Dukla Pass, so this was this Carpato-Duklyan operation, they started to liberate the territory in two directions. Of course, from the east, but also from the south. It took 7 months while Slovakia was liberated, and also a lot of casualties, mostly because of the really heavy fighting that was in Liptovský Mikuláš, and also in the battles in Žilina region. The whole region was liberated in the end of April 1945. By the way, it was the very last region that was liberated actually. So the forces were coming from the east, from Kalinovo, which was the first liberated town in Slovakia, and Žilina region was the last one. The other direction was from the south, as I mentioned, and by this direction Bratislava was liberated, for example, by the Red Army and Romanian Army as well. It was on April the 4th, 1945. As I've mentioned, it took 7 months while Slovakia was liberated, and it's quite a long time for a small state. So the German army, even though they knew there is no chance, they didn't just left. During this process, most of the infrastructure was destroyed. Bridges were detonated by retreating German forces. Also, railways and roads were destroyed because Germans wanted to stop the advance of Red Army and Czechoslovak forces, so they were destroying the infrastructure, so it will not be so easy to get them. Also, not just the Germans destroyed this infrastructure. The Allies were bombing the remains of the German army, and as you probably can guess, it's not so easy to focus just on the Germans, so also many Slovak civilians died as a result of that bombing. So the Allies caused also great amount of damage. Apart from Red Army and Czechoslovak forces, the American army was coming from the west to liberate the Europe. They, for example, liberated Pilsen and Karlsbad, alebo teda Plzeň a Karlovy Vary, but they were not allowed to continue because of the USSR. You know, during the World War II, there were many Allied conferences, as we've mentioned them. So also during the war, during this process, there were already conferences about post-war development. So how the borders will look like, about spheres of interest. So there were already talks about the division of powers after the war. And the USSR had some claims on the territory of Czechoslovakia. That's why this liberation by the Red Army brought the Soviet influence to the Second Czechoslovak Republic, and they later also used this help during the Slovak national uprising and the liberation as an excuse for our control and also the occupation. You know, this topic is quite accurate nowadays because this Friday, May the 8th, we will celebrate the end of World War II. And you know, just 1 week ago, we celebrated our liberation. And these events are considered to have two faces. You know, that we got rid of the chlorofascism, but in the same time, the Soviet influence was brought by the Red Army. As we will mention during the next topic, this regime was not better. And also, I hope that you're reading the newspapers. I hope that you're trying to stay up to date. And so I hope you've probably heard about the events that are now happening in Czech Republic that are connected to the liberation of the capital city, Prague. The Prague was liberated by Marshal Koněv, who apart from this liberation, Koněv, for example, suppressed the Hungarian Revolution in 1956. That was very similar to the occupation in Slovakia later in 1968. And he did that in a very cruel way, so just put it in this way. He was also a controversial personality. And Prague just decided to put his statue from the street to the storage and then to the museum. Well, there's actual law that was signed by President Putin that allows to punish anyone who will cause some damage to monuments, memorials, or tombs of Russian glory in Russia, but also abroad. And in fact, there's like 5-year sentence for this. So now, mayor and also some other people that surrounded him are now hiding because they are actually afraid of the Russian secret services. So, this situation is still very sensitive, and I would like you to see these things that were in the background as well. So of course there should be some gratefulness, but in the same time they helped us for also their own, you can say, selfish reasons. Okay, also I really hope that you're interested in what's happening around you and this kind of information, and maybe to have your own opinion about it, to discuss about it, and so on. Okay, the next topic I put into this video to have it all together, because these are just short topics, is Košice government program. This program was signed on April the 4th, 1945, so just 1 month before Slovakia was liberated. It was signed by the representatives of foreign and home resistance, so also London and Moscow based resistances and also home resistance. So they all met in Košice after it was liberated. And it was made to decide what's going to happen after the liberation will go successfully. So we can say Košice government program was the new program of the new government that was appointed by President Beneš, who came from the exile from London. So he was from London-based foreign resistance. So he appointed Staněk Fierlinger, a prime minister, and on the next day he came with the new government program until the post-war elections. So after there will be the first free elections after the war, the rightful new government will decide their own program. But so far, somebody had to stabilize the situation. So this was the Košice government program. So these are the most important points of that program. The number 1, restoration of Czechoslovak Republic, that would be based on democratic principles and pre-Munich borders. So we know that after Munich betrayal, Czechoslovakia lost Sudetenland. The next point, program promised to organize the democratic elections as soon as possible. So after the situation will be stable, there will be free democratic elections, so the state will decide for itself. Next, regional administration was took over by local committees. So they divided Czechoslovakia to different regions, and each one of them had local committee. Czechs and Slovaks were 2 equal nations in Czechoslovakia. So, in comparison to the first Czechoslovak Republic, where there was idea of Czechoslovakism, so there was one Czechoslovak nation, now Czechs and Slovaks were 2 equal nations. The highest legislative body of Slovakia will be Slovak National Council, and the executive, the Board of Commissioners. Prosím, tu ste opravte, lebo vo vašich poznámkach, ak ich máte vytlačené, som sa pomýlila a napísala som vlastne pre oba tieto orgány, že sú výkonné orgány, čiže executive, ale pritom Slovenská národná rada, ktorá bola teda vytvorená už vlastne počas slovenského štátu, bola zákonodárnym orgánom vlastne poverená a výkonným orgánom bol zbor povereníkov alebo the Board of Commissioners. Kľudne si to napíšte presne aj tieto názvy slovenské, lebo tie bude treba tiež vedieť, že zbor povereníkov, Board of Commissioners. All political parties and organizations cooperating with fascism will be prohibited. So the new government was strictly against fascism and clerofascism. Property of traitors and collaborants with the fascists will be confiscated. So everything that was owned by people who betrayed Czechoslovakia and were cooperating with Germans lost their property, and it was nationalized basically. So it became state property. All territories except Subcarpathian Rus was returned. So we know that Košice government program asked for pre-Munich borders, and it got it, but without Subcarpathian Rus. This part, which is modern-day Ukraine, was annexed by the USSR as a result of plebiscite. So this is like referendum. People voted that they want to be part of the USSR and not Czechoslovakia. But it was also a political game. Important industry and finances will be under the state control. The important part of Košice government program were Beneš decrees, Benešove decreti that were approved. These decrees stated that 3 million of Germans that were living in Czechoslovakia lost their citizenship, so they lost Czechoslovak citizenship and were deported from the country to Germany, and their property was confiscated. The Hungarians had the same destiny, but the ones that had one grandparent Slovak, or at least one grandparent, they could stay. So not all of the Hungarians were deported. So Beneš decrees were basically about forced migration. So as in the beginning of the Slovak state, the Czechs had to leave, now we forced Germans and Hungarians to leave the country. And the last but very important thing about Košice government program is that it signaled the future orientation of Czechoslovak foreign policy. And if you paid attention, you should know that with this state control and tone of some other points, it was towards the USSR and Bolshevism. So we can say this Košice government program issued on April the 4th, 1945, it was decided that in future we will be part of the Eastern Bloc. Here I have some pictures for you. So these are from this day when Košice government program was signed. So there's the building in Košice, and you have there all of these representatives in the picture. And I also put the one photo of Klement Gottwald and Gustav Husák, so two famous communist officials that will be a lot of important for the next development. And the very last thing I would like to mention are some of the monuments we have in Žilina that you've probably seen but never known that it had something to do with these important events that I've mentioned in this unit. So I will start from the left, and this is the memorial of Jewish Holocaust. You know, this particular one is on the place where the transit camp used to be. So it's in Žilina, Záriečie, and you can see some of the symbols. So there's actual railway that used to be there on which the wagons were transported with the Jews. You have there, memorial with the quotations, so the stone. You have there the Jewish star, David's star, and there are flowers, but also stones, because as I hope you know, the Jews put stones on the memorials and not flowers, because they express by that it will last forever. So that's the first, we can say, place of the memory that is in Žilina. The second one is picture on the right. I will go there because this is the railway station, Žilina Záriečie. Okay, so these two are really connected to each other. So picture on the left and on the right, on the top. Okay, so Žilina Záriečie, the station, I find very symbolic that nowadays this is like the cultural center, and there are a lot of workshops, concerts, theater plays, like dramas and so on, that are focused on open-mindedness, and they are maybe trying to fight against the prejudices, and I find it really very symbolic that on such place, we can say of horror, is now the place of cultural understanding. The second picture from the right is also very close, so all of this is in like Žilina, and it's a memorial of Josef Gabčík, so the man who was the part of Operation Anthropoid and the one who had a lot of courage to stand just in front of the car with his gun impossible to go off. The second picture from the left is Catholic house. So this place had a lot of to do with the beginning of the Slovak state, because from its balcony that you can see in the picture, the Slovak autonomy was declared. This Catholic house, if you can't really label now where it's located, it's really in the center and it's on Hurbanova Street. And the last picture that is on the right in the bottom is the old hospice, so like the very last place for the old people that there's like taking care of them. And in this specific place, Verba and Wetzler were hiding, and they were writing their message in this old hospice. It's on Holeho Street. I really want you to remember these places, and that is because, maybe you walked by for 1,000 times before and you've never realized what happened at these particular places in the past. And this was really not so long ago. And even ordinary buildings, which do not seem interesting, were witnesses of the past. So I want you to remember these from the pictures, and I would also like you to share some places that were connected to World War II from maybe the surroundings of your hometown, village, or so on. So I will give you that one homework after that to Google Classroom, just to send me something about it and picture or like that. And this is the end of our, we can say, short unit. So just study for the test. Everything what you have to know, you will just find in the presentation, in this online lectures, that's in your notes, and I hope everything will be okay. So that's it. Goodbye.